apparently I've been living under a rock, because I had a client tell me today, you didn't hear about the hurricane that like ripped through multiple states? And I kind of hadn't. I knew that I'd heard about a hurricane in Florida, but I hate to say it, sometimes you hear that so much you don't pay attention. And I was absolutely horrified to look into what Hurricane Helen had done to so many states. Moving to southern Missouri is the best thing I've ever done for my family. And the truth is, I don't really live under a rock. It's just that I live and breathe real estate 7 days a week. And sometimes I really get disconnected from what's going on in the world. But I have to say, this one really shook me. And I don't know, there's so many devastating hurricanes, but just seeing how massive, how large of a geographic area got hit just really hurt my heart. And Michelle and Karen, if you're watching this, thank you for encouraging me to lift my head out of my little narrow real estate world and see what's going on. Because, yeah, entire states got wrecked. I think one reason that this is near and dear to my heart, and I would say a little bit of post-traumatic stress, is just from living in California with the constant fires. That was always the way it was my whole life. I mean, I was fighting fire by age 10, you know what I mean? So a lot of people don't use this tool here in Missouri, but it is so cultural where I come from, which is the mountains of Northern California, and that's the McLeod. If you know what I'm talking about, what tool I'm talking about, write it in the description and tell me a McLeod story. But it's the coolest tool ever. But you can clear ground with it, you can break roots with it. I actually sharpened one time where I could just slice roots, and it's the ultimate firefighting tool if you're trying to cut line by hand in a really rugged area where there's not machinery. But anyway, so I knew how to use a McLeod at 10, right? And we were just kind of trained up. Fighting fire was a big cultural part of the community I grew up in because we always had fires. But it wasn't until living in Butte County and living in Chico, my uncle was living in Paradise, and literally watching Paradise get obliterated, wiped off the map. In a fire event, some even say it wasn't natural, you know what I mean? And I don't even know. They just had another massive one up there. It provably arson, but this not anything I've ever seen. And definitely not showing any normal fire behavior. Just the craziest. And when you grow up with fire, fighting fire, everyone's t-shirt was a volunteer fire department. It was just, there was so much energy that went into it. You really know what fire looks like. And man, I'll tell you what, the fires in California are unusual, super unusual. But I would say the devastation of having a town, my grandma had lived up there, my uncle was currently living up there, and it's where I spent a chunk of my life. And it was just traumatic to have the whole town gone. And so I think that's what really stirred my heart, looking at what happened and through so many states, but particularly Florida and North Carolina. But I do have this kindred thing with North Carolina, so I really understand there's a difference between a disaster and towns getting completely decimated. And I think that kind of PTSD got stirred up in me when I was watching the news about Hurricane Helen. I actually wanted to share with you and kind of do, a little bit more specific talks about natural disasters in southern Missouri, and really some reasons why we chose this area, because I may have mentioned it before, I'm kind of a neurotic researcher. ask my husband. I mean, I can dig and dig and dig and then read the footnotes and dig some more and like not get tired. So that's something that I like to do. And that was definitely something I did as we kind of had this idea of Southern Missouri. And then it was like, I wanted to look at Southern Missouri from every single angle. And yeah, natural disasters was one of them, because the summer that we moved here, we just kept our bags packed by the door. We just kept everything packed up. I think it was 3 times we were evacuated. And I mean, at that point, and it was like war zone, like you couldn't even see like the garage, you know what I mean? The smoke was like so thick. You couldn't see a building that was just like a couple 100 feet away. It was like you couldn't go outside, nothing. So, I maybe brought some of that with me just because that was what we were leaving. And so, yeah, I looked at Southern Missouri and, its natural disasters and how safe we would be here. And for us, Southern Missouri checks like the boxes in a kind of really surprising way when it comes to safety over natural disasters. So I would like to talk about, I'll talk about fire, just because that's what I came from, but that's definitely not one of the ones that people talk about having any concern about. So there's kind of a sneak peek into what my perspective will be about fire in Southern Missouri. But we will also talk about tornadoes, obviously a big one. And then of course, a tandem issue there would be flooding. We're going to talk about the new Madrid fault line, and yeah, I mean, what else is there? Kind of that's it. Yeah, that's it. That's what we'll talk about. So fire. They don't really happen here except for faulty wiring. And that is why my last video is about get a home inspection. Have an electrician, even beyond your home inspection, then have a master electrician or someone super skilled go through your property and make sure that you've got safe, clean electricity in your home. That is the #1 cause of house fire. And I just think that super preventable. And that's kind of what makes me sad about it. But yeah, other than that, in terms of like wildfire, I haven't ever seen one. And let me tell you, wow, it's such a relief. Now what's cool is that like everybody and their mother burns, like the sides of their road, like kind of like prescription burn, you know what I mean? You see people actually burn out brush underneath like a nice healthy stand of trees and, not really do anything to the trees, just burning out that brush. And people do that all over. It's really cool, because in California that was like a huge battle, and it was actually a lot of the tribes, a lot of the Native American tribes started working with like the forestry, different parts of like the forestry service, and then they were kind of teaching them like how they had used controlled burns historically to manage California. So it was kind of cool to see how that came back, but boy, was there red tape. You know what I mean? Like there's so much regulation, and so it'd be hard for them to do them. And sometimes they would lead to like serious fires too. Like, cause there, everything is a tinder box. It's just a tinder box. Like just light a match and poof. So yeah, that didn't give prescribed burns a good name when they got out of control. But anyway, here it's like everybody does it. I'm sure that when they do it large scale, they're filing some sort of permits, but otherwise, people are just burning alongside the roads on their property. And yeah, it just seems like a good use of fire, and I don't mind it at all. I think it's a good thing. And other than that, I've never seen anything get out of control or any wildfire. So that's not really a thing here. Now let's talk tornadoes, because that's obviously a real thing. And I've given little snippets of this in other videos, but this is where you can come and just we will talk just about these issues. So in Southern Missouri, hills are your friends. If your property and your home is not protected kind of strategically by mountains, then you should have a storm shelter. I don't think it's a bad idea. Now, I personally would feel safe enough just in a basement. Our last property, I've told you a little bit, it was a fixer-upper, single pane windows, rough. And we went down to the basement in pretty much an official tornado. Like, it was touching down in places. And that was the only time I did not feel safe. Like, just even in the basement didn't feel safe. And it was those single pane windows. Like, windows that already, shake if you just walk in the house, So that storm, I really, really, in my head, I wasn't saying it because I didn't want to freak out the family, but I was like, I just felt like the windows were going to get blown out. So that storm definitely made me realize that it's not just having a basement or this, that, and the other. It's having a well-built home. Now, if you have any insecurity about how well built your home is, just the basement might not be enough. And that's when maybe you want to consider having either the safe room or a storm shelter. There's some great companies in Springfield that can come build them, and they can also serve as a root cellar. A lot of people use them as that, and also store food. And kind of makes sense too, because if you were down there and you had food, that'd be okay as well. But yeah, I totally get that. There was a point where I kind of was like, oh, people don't need storm shelters. The storms here are so mild. And then after experiencing that one pretty mild tornado, I definitely got it. That storm actually scared me, and I'm a real storm lover. The more it's raging, kind of the better I like it, but I reached my threshold, and so that's good to do. But I'll tell you what, all in all, the mountains are my favorite security. I personally would rather have a property tucked up in the mountains, a little holler, tucked in those mountains, than to be on a super flat spot and then just have that storm shelter. And it's not because I don't think that I will survive in the storm shelter, it's because I'm risking also then all of our property and home and everything else. So, I don't want to sound like a bigot, but I truly, after what happened to Joplin, and I think it was 2011 or whatever, when Joplin got leveled, and it hasn't happened since. It has not. But that is alarming. And it's alarming enough for me to not want to live where it's super, super flat. I get it. If you're in that western part of Missouri, and I totally understand loving land and having that loyalty, and you guys rebuilt your town, and that's epic. So much respect for that. And at the same time, I personally really like to kind of put myself strategically where it is the safest, So if you look at a map of Missouri and you look at Joplin, it's all the way over in that western strip, and it's very close to the region that people call Tornado Alley. My husband and I kind of have dubbed Joplin the true beginning of Tornado Alley, and if you look at it just in terms of topography, it is flat as a pancake. And the only dimension you really see, just like Oklahoma, is the trees. And that's actually what really a lot of people talked about, when tornadoes do hit really hard here, some of those flat areas, they can't actually see them coming just because of all the thick forest. It's harder to see what's going on, and it's deceiving. The forest does not stop the hurricane. Even though it gives dimension to your view and it can be gorgeous, it's not hills. So you need the hills to break up those tornadoes, because tornadoes, instead of just building strength, going across a flat land, instead, when there's the hills, they kind of start to skip. And when they skip and they're jumping, and they start to dissipate instead of gaining power. And so that is something very important to me. And that literally is something I researched before moving here. And one reason that I thought southern Missouri seemed like perfect topography. And I guess I should clarify that I particularly like, in terms of safety, and what I'm outlining in this video is south central Missouri. The reason why I don't like to go too west is because of that tornado, the beginning of that Tornado Alley. And kind of the reason why I don't like to go too far east is it does get really hard. It's kind of economically depressed. And if you notice too, if you go way east, you're gonna find just so many foreclosures. It's gonna look like 2008. And, those are markers of an unhealthy economy. And so, I look at everything holistically, and that's why I like kind of right smack dab in the middle, South Central Missouri. Yeah, and the last factor I want to talk about is earthquakes, which people don't probably even think about in terms of like a characteristic of Southern Missouri, but they do happen, and they do even happen down in Arkansas. But what people really seem to talk about is the New Madrid fault line and the big one, and when that one goes off and what it could do. And because we already have history too of like whenever, I don't remember the years, but when, the Mississippi River like flowed backwards, that seems pretty notable. So I've talked to a lot of people, and the stories that I've heard, like old timers telling their like parent stories, and that Southern Missouri is also just off that fault line enough that we're fairly protected here. And I verified that before moving here. I verified that with like, more kind of like peer-reviewed research and more kind of like scientific stuff. But when I got here, boots on the ground, that is what local stories were. It was like a resounding yes, like we're safe. We're fairly safe from that, like that big event, because of being a little offset from that fault line. Also, I'm going to assume just the different kind of geological kind of characteristics, like just the way that we are built upon rock and the way that we're structured also seems very safe. So I actually had someone comment on it. I did a 2-part series on healthcare in Springfield, and one of you guys commented. I actually wish you'd comment some more because it was so interesting. And it was about how Springfield was designated as like the triage area. Like if there was ever a major event, disaster, especially pertaining to that fault line, that Springfield would be the area to kind of be the base camp for the medical, and all of that kind of like support would come from Springfield. So they actually canceled out like all the other major cities, which I thought was super interesting. If you're that viewer and you left that comment, tell me more, because it really made sense too. And their point was like, that was how really kind of the healthcare system, everyone like in the state, and maybe it was even more than the state, but was pouring into Springfield. And that's how we got kind of so specialized. And we do have this like really amazing healthcare in Springfield. And that was because it was designated as kind of a safe zone. And if that is true, if anyone else has any more information on that, that is fascinating. Kind of feeling pretty good about that too. Like that definitely is like another, big piece of evidence that could make us feel more secure here. But I think it's just actually, I look for things like that because, usually whether it's like government or like some sort of like group of like medical bodies, like the amount of research that they're going to do to come up with that decision is going to be huge. It might even be more than you and I here do on our crazy deep dives in the internet and YouTube. So I love to hear that kind of stuff, because then that's just another layer kind of proving our theories, So that actually made me feel super good that Springfield is kind of a chosen area to provide support if there was ever a big event. Quick little side note too, a lot of people talk about how we would be safe here from any kind of Yellowstone event. So yeah, if anyone has any information on that, also leave a comment, because that's super fascinating to me. I haven't come across any science that would prove that, but kind of made sense to me. But yeah, if anyone has any information, share it. So you guys, I know this was kind of a like, not dark, but pretty serious video, and I think that they're important. I think it's important to bring these things to people's minds of, just like humans did for probably the bulk of humanity, of making educated decisions on where to build home, because sometimes we make the decisions in the modern world on purely superficial things, and I'm guilty of it too at times, but I think that, it is important to look at some of these things. And hey, even if you don't like doing the research, I do. And I'm going to let you know that I vetted this area for a lot of different things. And I found Southern Missouri to be one of the safest places in the country. As always, you guys, I want to thank you for sticking around. If you found any value in this video, like and subscribe. It truly helps to grow the channel and get the information out to more people. And hands down, you guys, moving to Southern Missouri was the best decision my family and I ever made. And if you too are thinking about making that move, give me a call, text, Zoom, email, all that stuff. And we'll start talking about how you can make such a pivotal move too. Okay, you guys, all my information is in the description. Until next time, thank you.